to other computer companies. At the end of 1978, with sales approaching the 1 million mark, they moved Microsoft from Albuquerque to Seattle. Bill was glad to be back and went into high gear to promote his hometown company.
We always design with the future in mind. Our research people are always tracking the latest in hardware and software technology.
It was Bill Gates who was actually the real marketing genius behind Microsoft. Early on, he was the one who was actually going out on the road and trying to sell this company and its software. And oftentimes, he would take his mother with him on these trips.
Bill's highly respected and well-connected mother would come to play a pivotal role in his early career.
Mary served on a number of corporate boards as well as the University of Washington. She was on the National Board of United Way. Also on the National Board of United Way was the CEO of IBM, which is how her son met the CEO of IBM, through her.
What would your ideal home computer be like?
By November of 1980, IBM was banging on the door of the fledgling Microsoft.
Without an overpowering price.
The largest maker of computers in the world now wanted to talk to Gates and Allen about coming up with an operating system for their new line of personal computers. From their first meeting, IBM misjudged who they were dealing with.
He looked like a sub-teen, you know. He was skinny, had a real mop of hair, you know, kind of casual, and basically people didn't take him seriously as a business person.
But the IBM brass soon discovered Gates was no amateur. He quickly convinced them that Microsoft could deliver their new software. First, he purchased an existing operating system, which he then adapted for the IBM personal computers, calling it MS-DOS.
Bill Gates, as he's often done as a shrewd businessman, knew where to get an operating system. He just went down the road a few miles and bought it for $50,000. But then the real brilliance was that when they developed that operating system for IBM, IBM wanted to buy the source code, which would have given them the disk operating system, or what became known as DOS. And instead, Microsoft refused to actually sign the rights over to DOS.
By not owning the rights to the operating system, IBM would now have to pay Microsoft a licensing fee for every copy of DOS installed on its computers.
It can help a manager excel.
IBM was also about to lose its tremendous edge in computer sales.
The IBM personal computer.
As other companies introduced personal computers that were cheaper than IBM's, Microsoft was able to sell the same operating system to all of them.
There were all kinds of computers that were being conceived at that point in time. And it struck me that I don't know who will win in the hardware business, but Microsoft has a very good chance to win in the software business.
Between 1978 and 1981, Microsoft's growth was staggering. The staff was enlarged from 13 employees to 128. Revenues mushroomed from $4 to $16 million. By 1983, 30% of all the personal computers in the world were running Microsoft software. Still, Bill Gates never took his eye off the bottom line.
He never flew first class unless it was absolutely necessary. You would often find him sitting in coach, in fact, with a blanket over his head so he could get some sleep. So his parents taught him well early on the value of money and hard work, and translated later into his life with not only how he ran his personal life, but how he ran Microsoft.
My name is Bill Gates. I'm chairman of Microsoft.
The early 1980s was an exciting time for an industry run mostly by people under 30. Microsoft began working on software for innovative companies like Apple and its guru, Steve Jobs. Their Macintosh computer and software were considered by many to be the most ingenious in the industry and the way of the future.
To create a new standard, it takes something that's really new and really captures people's imagination. And the Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
But it wouldn't be long before Microsoft and Apple would be locked in a bitter struggle over the rights to the next generation of software. Bill Gates was also about to receive news that would rock Microsoft to its very foundation. By 1983, the future could not have looked more promising for 28-year-old Bill Gates and Microsoft. The personal computer business was booming, and there was an ever-increasing hunger for software. Bill Gates and Paul Allen were emerging as the crown princes of the personal computer age. But in the midst of the breathtaking rise of their company, they were stunned by some terrible news. Paul Allen, Bill's friend and partner since high school, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer.
It did give Bill kind of a perspective that he didn't have before. You know, he'd always been very, very hard driving, very demanding, and this may have helped him understand a little bit better in terms of what other people go through.
Allen's disease went into remission 1 year later, but he would never again take full part in the day-to-day business of Microsoft. For two men in their early 30s who created a company of global significance and made millions, it was the end of an era.
I think history's going to show that their partnership really was an incredible dynamic. I often compare it to the Beatles, Lennon and McCartney. The songs they wrote together are the ones that pretty much we remember and get played over and over again. They were great songwriters individually. You know, we still hear their songs that they wrote on their own. But somehow together they were even greater than the sum of their parts. And Paul and Bill were like that.
By 1984, Bill Gates had become the singular face of Microsoft. In April of that year, he was heralded by Time magazine as the quintessential representative of a new breed of businessman. One who understood both nuts and bolts technology and corporate strategy.
When you work with Bill, you can see that in almost any meeting you're in or anything you're discussing, Bill instantly puts together a profile of all of the cases. What about this? 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 He almost builds this checklist of everything that can possibly happen in his head in a very structured way, and then he runs through it.
Protect mode file system, the super advanced file system.
Microsoft was often referred to as a math camp, where Gates' demanding management style kept the creative process churning and sometimes set off heated confrontations.
The early Gates would challenge just about anything. He'd call things the stupidest idea you'd ever heard. And part of it was to test, to see, well, okay, if you disagree, you've got to convince me that it's not the stupidest idea in the world.
A constant challenging of ideas was required to stay on top in an ever-changing industry. Gates surrounded himself with a team that shared his relentless work ethic.
Certainly when we are working to release a software product, we are sleepless in Seattle. There's a story about Bill from Miriam Lubau, his assistant. She was new to the company. She came in one morning and she didn't know if she should call police because there was this guy sleeping under a desk. But it turned out to be Bill.
The effort was paying off. Microsoft posted more than $140 million in sales in 1985. In 1986, Gates introduced Microsoft Windows. It would become the company's signature program. Critics quickly noted that in its use of a mouse and icons, it bore more than a passing resemblance to the Apple Macintosh operating system, considered to be the most user-friendly.
If you know how to point, you already know